My ex-husband used my grief over our daughter's death to take custody of our son, then planted lavender in his shampoo, knowing he was allergic before fleeing to Thailand with him. My ex-husband Riker told the courts I was too emotional to care for our son 6 months after my daughter died. She passed away in the car with him. He was at a bar drinking, so she volunteered to drive him home since she was going that way anyway. That was the last time I told her goodnight. Riker was riddled with guilt for the first few months. He enrolled himself into grief counseling and checked in on me so much it started causing fights with his new girlfriend. It sounds bad, but seeing his life get worse made me feel a little better in this sick, twisted way. But then 4 months after, the comments started. When do you think you'll be ready to move on? Is this what she would want? I tried to ignore it, but then came the photography. He'd take pictures of me crying for memories, kept his phone secretly audio recording, speaking about Michaela to make me break down. Before I knew it, he was texting on the days I had our son. Did you remember to pick him up from school? Is dinner handled? I was struggling, I'll admit. Got prescribed Zoloft and joined a support group for parents who'd lost children. I thought being transparent with him would help. I sent him updates about my progress and how some days felt like tsunamis. I had no idea he was using this against me. I still remember the day I got served papers at Michaela's grave. On what would have been her 17th birthday. Emergency custody modification. Pages of evidence, photos of my house with dishes in the sink, texts where I'd said, I can't do this anymore. Claims our son said, Mommy's always sad. He wanted immediate custody transfer, psychological evaluation, supervised visitation only. I screamed and cried to him over the phone that night, but he just recorded it as extra evidence. 3 weeks later, the incident happened. Riker texted me on Sunday night. Girlfriend's in hospital. Can you please take him? I'll grab him early tomorrow. I said yes. He brought our son over at 7 p.m., asked to use the bathroom upstairs. Was up there maybe 3 minutes. Came down, hugged our son, then headed out the door. The next morning, he was at my door at 8 a.m. sharp. Our son was taking a shower like he always did in the mornings when we heard him yell in pain. We ran up and opened the door, and his face was swollen like a balloon. Bright red skin, welts spreading across his arms in real time. It hurts, Mommy, it hurts. I ran to him, my hands shaking as I tried to understand. Riker immediately started yelling, What did you do? Get his clothes now! I tried to explain there was nothing here to cause this, but Riker just kept shouting how he asked for one favor and I screwed it up. He rushed our crying and blistered son to the car, telling him Daddy's here to help. I remember curling into a fetal position on the floor and sobbing. I'd failed to protect both my children. Later, I started investigating how this allergic reaction could have happened. I smelled the shampoo bottle. That's when I got hit with it. Lavender. Our son's been allergic to it since he was 2. My mind raced on how this was possible, and then I realized. Riker. When he dropped him off last night and went upstairs, he put lavender in the shampoo. I called him. There was lavender in the shampoo. His voice was cold. I think the grief is messing with your head. Why would I do that to our boy? The emergency hearing happened 48 hours later. Our son's ER report was damning. I tried explaining that Riker set me up, but the court looked at me like I was crazy. The judge ruled, while the court sympathizes with your grief, the child's safety comes first. Immediate custody to father. 4 hours supervised visitation on Saturdays. 2 weeks later, Riker poured salt in the wound and filed to terminate my visitation entirely. Our son's new therapist he got 2 weeks ago even wrote a letter about trauma symptoms. My own lawyer said I might have to say goodbye to my son, but then 2 days before the final hearing, she made a request, a record of the grief counseling Riker claimed to attend, to prove he was where he claimed he was. The judge ordered they be provided within 24 hours, and when Riker's lawyer stalled, we realized we'd struck gold. But then that same night, Riker vanished. Even his lawyer couldn't reach him. After 20 hours, someone from a travel agency called my lawyer. Turns out, Riker paid cash for 2 tickets to Thailand last night. 1 adult, 1 child. The airport footage showed my son clutching his little backpack walking through. That night, my lawyer called. Riker never attended grief counseling. He lied to you. I'm sorry. My world stopped. I put the phone down and sobbed. For a long time after I wondered why would someone lie about attending grief counseling. But now it's years later. My son is mine again. And I now finally understand why Riker never went to grief counseling for Michaela. Because how do you grieve someone you killed? The words hang in the air after I say them out loud for the first time. My hands shake as I close my laptop where the travel agency email still glows on the screen. I need to figure out what really happened that night. I walk to the hall closet and pull down the cardboard box I haven't touched in years. Inside are all the documents from Michaela's death. Police reports, insurance papers, things I couldn't bear to look at before. The official report says Riker was the passenger, but something feels wrong about the timeline. He called 911 40 minutes after the estimated crash time. I spread the papers across my kitchen table and start marking times with a yellow highlighter. The bar closed at 2 a.m., but the crash happened at 1:20 a.m. according to the report. Why would he still be there if Michaela was picking him up? I grab my phone and search Facebook for the bar's page. The bartender from that night still works there according to recent posts. I send him a message explaining who I am and asking if he remembers anything. He responds within an hour saying he definitely remembers Riker because he was a regular. He's confused though because Riker only had 2 beers over 3 hours that night. He wasn't even close to drunk enough to need a ride home. He offers to write a statement about what he saw. I print out his messages and add them to my growing pile of evidence. The next morning, I call 3 different lawyers about reopening the case. The first one says pursuing this while Riker's missing will look vindictive to any judge. The second one says the same thing almost word for word. The third suggests I focus on getting my son back first and then worry about justice for Michaela. I hang up feeling defeated but not surprised. I drive to the police station to file the missing person report officially, even though we know he fled. The detective assigned to the case looks tired and tells me straight up that parental abduction cases to non-Hague countries rarely end well. Thailand doesn't have an extradition treaty for these types of cases. He takes down all the information, but I can tell he doesn't think we'll get anywhere. That Thursday, my support group meets at the community center like always. I tell them everything that's happened and they become my lifeline as I navigate this new nightmare. One mother there went through something similar when her ex took their kids to India for 2 years. She warns me to prepare for a long fight and gives me the name of a specialist lawyer. She also suggests I start documenting everything online to build public pressure. That night, I create a social media page about finding my son. I post his school photo and basic information about the situation. Within days, I'm getting messages from other parents with similar stories offering advice and support. I also get a few cruel ones saying I must have deserved it if my own kid was taken. I learned to block those quickly without reading them fully. The bank calls me 3 days later about suspicious activity on our old joint account. Riker's been withdrawing cash from ATMs in Bangkok, hitting the maximum amount each day. At least we know they made it there safely, which is something. I ask the bank to keep tracking the withdrawals and send me updates. 2 weeks pass before CPS shows up at my door for a home visit. They need to document that I have a safe environment for when my son returns. They walk through every room taking photos with an iPad. They check his bedroom and ask if I've changed anything since he left. They ask about my mental health treatment and want to see my medication bottles. They measure the temperature of my hot water heater and check that I have working smoke detectors. They ask for my therapist's contact information and whether I have a stable income. I pass their inspection, but it feels invasive having strangers judge whether I'm fit to have my own child back. After they leave, I sit on my son's bed and smell his pillow, which still has his scent. I decide I need to do more than just wait for the system to work. I research private investigators who specialize in international child recovery. Most of them are too expensive, but I find one who offers payment plans. She's worked cases in Thailand before and knows people there who can help. She tells me finding them is usually the easy part, but getting kids back requires patience and sometimes creative solutions. I wire her the deposit using money from my savings account. She starts working her contacts immediately and promises to update me every few days. Within a week, she has a lead on which neighborhood they're staying in. She says Riker enrolled our son in an international school using fake documents. The next update comes with photos taken from across the street showing my son in a school uniform I don't recognize. He looks okay physically, but his smile doesn't reach his eyes the way it used to. I stare at those photos for hours, memorizing every detail of how he's changed. The investigator says she's working on getting someone inside the school who can talk to him. So Riker's been using grief as a weapon this whole time? The way he switched from guilt-ridden ex to calculated evidence collector makes me wonder if that initial remorse was even real or just another performance for his twisted game. She warns me this will take time, and I need to keep following the legal channels too. Meanwhile, my lawyer finally gets the court to issue an emergency order for Riker to return our son immediately. Of course, it means nothing since Thailand won't enforce it, but we need it for the next steps. The State Department gets involved and assigns us a caseworker who explains the Hague Convention doesn't apply here. She gives me a folder full of forms to fill out and says the process usually takes 18 months minimum. I ask what the success rate is, and she just gives me a sad smile. 2 days later, the Grief Counseling Center finally calls my lawyer back. The receptionist sounds confused and says they've searched their entire system 3 times. They have no record of anyone named Riker ever attending a single session, not one. My lawyer immediately files this with the court along with a motion for contempt. The judge schedules an emergency hearing, but of course Riker's already gone. That same afternoon, I get a notification on Instagram from someone I don't recognize. It's his girlfriend, or I guess ex-girlfriend now. She tells me she left him 2 months before he took off to Thailand. She says after the lavender thing didn't work the way he planned, he became obsessed. He spent hours making spreadsheets about custody laws and recording our phone calls. She was scared of him by the end. She sends me screenshots of his texts where he talks about winning no matter what. I forward everything to my lawyer, who adds it to our growing pile of evidence that means nothing while they're gone. The private investigator needs photos for the missing person case, so I spend the weekend going through old pictures. That's when I see it. A photo from the bar the night Michaela died, posted on their Facebook page. There's Riker in the background wearing the same blue shirt he said got ruined with her blood. The timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. The accident happened at 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes. The shirt is completely clean in the photo. No stains, no tears, nothing. My hands shake as I zoom in closer and closer. He told me he held her as she died, said her blood was everywhere, said he had to throw the shirt away because he couldn't stand looking at it. But there it is, perfectly clean. I send it to my lawyer, who says we'll add it to the file, but right now we need to focus on finding them. 3 weeks pass before we get our first real lead. The private investigator calls at 2 a.m. my time. He found them through an expat Facebook group where someone recognized my son from the photos. They're in Phuket, living in a small apartment near Patong Beach. Riker's working at a dive shop using the name Ryan Miller. My son goes by Mike now instead of Michael. The investigator sends me photos taken from across the street. My baby looks so tan and his hair is bleached from the sun. He's wearing a school uniform I don't recognize. My lawyer calls the next morning to manage my expectations. She explains that knowing where they are doesn't mean we can just go get him. Thai authorities won't grab a child from their parent without the right paperwork. We need to work through official channels, which means more waiting. The State Department assigns us a new caseworker who specializes in parental kidnapping cases. She tells me to prepare for a long process, months at minimum, possibly years. They'll start with a welfare check to make sure he's safe. Then we begin the legal proceedings through Thai courts. She gives me another stack of forms to fill out. I ask what happens if Riker finds out we know where he is and runs again. She doesn't answer directly. A month later, we get notification that Riker's credit card was used at an online education website. He's buying 4th grade homeschool materials. My son should be in regular school with his friends, playing at recess, doing group projects. Instead, he's isolated in a foreign country with just his father. The investigator tracks more purchases, including Thai language learning books and medical supplies. My lawyer files for an emergency order requiring Riker to return our son immediately. The judge signs it, but we all know it's meaningless. Thailand won't enforce a U.S. court order. We need it for the next steps in the process. The State Department sends it through diplomatic channels, which takes another 3 weeks. weeks. Meanwhile, I have to go back to work full-time to pay for everything. The lawyer fees alone are crushing me. The private investigator charges by the day. The court filings all have fees. My boss understands at first, but I can tell my coworkers are getting tired of my drama. They stop asking how I'm doing. They avoid me in the break room. I keep my head down and work overtime whenever I can. Every penny goes toward getting my son back. The guardian ad litem the court appointed finally files her report. She writes that Riker's failure to appear combined with the false counseling claims shows a pattern of deception. She recommends immediate return of full custody to me. She notes the Lavender incident appears deliberate based on the evidence. The judge agrees and grants me sole custody. It feels like a hollow victory while my son is 8,000 miles away. That weekend, my son's best friend's mom calls. Her boy has been having nightmares about Michael never coming back. He keeps asking when his friend will be home. She wants to know if there's anything she can do to help. I ask her to please save his spot on the soccer team. She promises they will. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything from Thailand. The embassy called saying Thai police did a welfare check at the address Riker gave them. My son looked healthy, but the officers noticed he wasn't enrolled in any school. Riker showed them papers claiming they were just on vacation and would return soon. The officers said without a Thai court order, they couldn't do anything more. I spent the next 3 days on my laptop reading everything about Thai family law. Most websites were in Thai, so I used Google Translate over and over. I found a lawyer in Bangkok through an expat forum who handled custody cases. She emailed back saying she needed $5,000 just to start the case. My bank account had $800 in it. I set up a GoFundMe page that night with pictures of my son at his last birthday party. After a week, it raised $500, mostly from people at my support group. While waiting for more donations, I went through Riker's old laptop he left behind when he moved out. Hidden in the drafts folder of his email were messages he never sent from right after Michaela died. One draft to his brother said, "I can't live with what I've done," before he deleted it. Another unsent email to his mom said, "It should have been me, not her." I printed everything and brought it to my lawyer, who shook her head and said it wasn't enough for criminal charges. She suggested hiring a forensic analyst to look at the crash photos from that night. The analyst cost another $1,000 I didn't have, but my sister loaned it to me. The woman spent 2 weeks examining every detail in the police photos. She called me with her findings, and my hands shook as I wrote them down. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone 5'11", which was Riker's exact height. Michaela was 5'4" and always moved the seat way up when she drove. The seatbelt bruising on Riker's chest matched the driver's side belt, not the passenger side. There were glass cuts on his left arm, consistent with the driver's window breaking. I took all this evidence to the district attorney's office downtown. The prosecutor listened to everything and looked through the photos carefully. She said proving vehicular manslaughter 3 years later would be almost impossible even with this evidence. She promised someone would review the case but told me not to expect much. That same week, I got a letter from my insurance saying they wouldn't cover therapy sessions anymore. I'd used up my yearly mental health coverage already. The support group leader heard about it and let me keep coming for free. Another parent whose daughter died of cancer offered to pay for 1 session a month. I sat in my car after accepting and cried for 20 minutes. Then Riker's parents called out of nowhere saying they just found out he took my son to Thailand. They claimed they had no idea he was planning to run and felt terrible about everything. They offered to pay the Thai lawyer's fee if I promised not to pursue criminal charges against their son. I wanted to hang up on them, but I needed that money desperately. I told them I'd think about it for a day. The next morning, I called back and agreed to their terms even though it made me sick. They wired the money that afternoon and I immediately sent it to the Bangkok lawyer. She filed the paperwork with the family court there within a week. During our video call, she warned me the process usually takes 6 to 8 months if everything goes smoothly. If Riker fights it in court, it could take years to get my son back. I needed more money to keep the lawyer working, so I finally did something I'd been avoiding. I sold Michaela's car that had been sitting in my garage under a tarp. Looking at it made me want to throw up, but I needed the money. The dealer only gave me $3,000 for it since it was older. Combined with what Riker's parents sent, it would keep the lawyer working for a few more months. A week later, a journalist from the local paper emailed asking if she could write about international parental kidnapping. She'd heard about my case from someone at the courthouse and thought publicity might help. I agreed to the interview, hoping maybe government officials would pay attention if it got coverage. The article ran the following Sunday with the headline, "Local Mother Fights to Bring Son Home from Thailand." Instead of sympathy, I got nasty comments online saying I must have done something wrong for a father to take such drastic action. Riker's parents suddenly showing up with money feels awfully convenient. They claim they had no idea, but they're quick to offer cash if she drops criminal charges. The timing of that blue shirt photo discovery is what really gets me though. 5 minutes. People called me an unfit mother and said maybe the boy was better off with his dad. Some even said I was using my daughter's death for attention, which made me delete all my social media accounts. 6 months passed and the school secretary called to say they had to officially remove my son from enrollment since he'd been absent so long. I drove there with an empty box and walked into his classroom where his desk still sat in the 3rd row by the window. His teacher helped me pack up his pencil case with the dinosaur stickers, his half-finished journal about what he wanted to be when he grew up, a marine biologist, and the library book about sharks he never got to return. She handed me a card she'd bought herself that said, "Hope to see you back soon," with all his classmates' signatures inside. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried holding that card because those kids still asked about him every week. The investigator called that afternoon with an update from his contact in Phuket, who'd been watching the apartment complex where Riker was staying. He sent 3 photos through encrypted email showing my son at the beach building sandcastles, his skin darker from the sun and his hair grown past his ears now. In one photo, he was looking out at the water, and even from the distance, you could see something wasn't right in his eyes, like he was searching for something he couldn't find. I printed all 3 photos and stared at them for hours, memorizing every detail of how much he'd changed, how his shoulders seemed smaller somehow, how he wasn't smiling in any of them. 2 weeks later, I registered for a conference about international international child abduction in Washington, D.C., using the last of my credit card limit for the hotel and flight. The conference room was filled with parents holding photos of their missing kids, some taken decades ago, and during lunch I met a woman who'd been searching for her daughter for 12 years after her ex took her to Lebanon. She told me about recovery services that operated in countries where law enforcement wouldn't help, companies that charged $50,000 to physically retrieve children and bring them home, though she warned me that using them meant never being able to go back to that country again. I took notes on everything, filling a whole notebook with contact numbers and website addresses. When I got home, there was a certified letter from my mortgage company saying I was 3 months behind on payments and they were starting foreclosure proceedings. I called them crying and explained my situation, and after 2 hours on hold and being transferred 4 times, they agreed to modify my loan, but it meant adding 10 more years of payments and higher interest. Every penny I had now went toward lawyer fees, investigator costs, and saving for whatever it would take to get my son back, even if it meant I'd be paying off this house until I was 70. The Thai court finally scheduled a preliminary hearing for 3 months out, but my lawyer warned me that Riker had hired his own Thai attorney who was already filing motions claiming I was mentally unstable and unfit. He'd submitted all those photos he took of me crying after Michaela died as evidence, along with the audio recordings of me screaming at him on the phone, painting a picture of a mother who'd lost her mind from grief. Then came the subpoena for a deposition in a case I didn't even know existed until that moment. Riker's parents were getting divorced, and his mother was using his actions as grounds, claiming his father had enabled their son's behavior for years. I sat in that law office for 4 hours, answering questions about Riker's relationship with his parents, and afterward his mother pulled me aside in the parking lot with tears in her eyes. I should have seen what he was capable of, she said, grabbing my hands. When he was younger, there were signs, but his father always made excuses. She gave me her new phone number and said she'd testify for me if needed. The mother from my support group who'd warned me this would be a long fight invited me to her house to show me her system for keeping track of everything. She had 3 filing cabinets full of receipts, court documents, emails, phone logs, everything organized by date with backup copies in a safety deposit box. Document everything, she said, showing me her journal where she wrote daily entries about her case. Save every receipt, every email, record every phone call if your state allows it, because you never know what tiny detail might matter later. She'd been fighting for 2 years to get her son back from Greece and said the most important thing was to never give up, even when it felt hopeless. Late one night, I couldn't sleep and started searching expat forums for Thailand, using different keywords until I found posts from someone whose writing style seemed familiar. The username was different, but the paranoia was pure Riker, asking about visa extensions, whether hiring private security was worth it, how to homeschool without drawing attention from authorities, and constantly mentioning how he thought someone was watching him. Good, I thought, scrolling through his posts. He should be worried because I would never stop looking for them. My therapist suggested I write letters to my son even though I couldn't send them, as a way to stay connected and process my feelings. I started writing one every Sunday, telling him about his best friend's birthday party at the trampoline park, how his dog waited by the door every day at 3:30, when the school bus used to drop him off, how I hadn't changed anything in his room and his Lego sets were exactly where he left them. I kept the letters in a box under his bed, promising myself I'd give them to him when he came home. Then the State Department caseworker called with more bureaucratic nonsense, saying Thailand was demanding additional documentation to prove I had legal custody, even though Riker had literally kidnapped our son in violation of a court order. The irony that I needed to prove I was the custodial parent when he was the one who fled the country wasn't lost on anyone, but that's how these cases worked, she explained, each country protecting their own interests first. I spent the next 3 weeks gathering every piece of paper they wanted, while also starting a second job doing data entry from home at night. The work was boring, but it paid $800 a month that went straight to legal fees. My fingers would cramp from typing medical codes into spreadsheets until 2 in the morning. I'd wake up at 6 to get ready for my regular job and start the whole thing over again. The forensic analyst called during my lunch break one Tuesday with her final report on the crash. She walked me through all the evidence about seat positions and seatbelt marks that proved Riker was driving that night. The injuries matched someone behind the wheel, not the passenger seat where he claimed to be. My lawyer added the 40-page report to our growing pile of evidence against him. A week later, a parent from the abduction conference reached out with contact info for a nonprofit that helped with international cases. They couldn't give money but had experts who'd handled hundreds of these situations. The woman on the phone spent 2 hours explaining Thai legal procedures and what documents would actually matter to their courts. She said most parents made the mistake of sending too much paperwork that just confused things. On what would have been Michaela's 20th birthday, I drove to the cemetery with fresh flowers. I sat by her headstone and told her everything about finding her brother and the investigation into that night. I promised her I'd get justice even if it took the rest of my life. The groundskeeper was locking the gates when I finally left. 3 days before the Thai hearing, my lawyer called to say Riker's attorney claimed he was sick and needed to postpone. She thought it was just a stalling move since he'd done this twice already with other hearings. The new date got pushed out 2 more months, which would be almost a year since they fled. One of my son's friends had his mom drop off a letter he'd written. It said he hoped my son would come back soon, so they could play Minecraft together again. I put it in a box with all the other things I was saving for when he came home. His baseball glove was in there, along with photos from his last birthday party and report cards from the school. The private investigator emailed that Riker was selling stuff online and had moved to a cheaper apartment outside the main tourist area. She'd found listings for his watch and some electronics on local selling sites. Her contacts said he'd been asking around about under-the-table work since his savings were running out. She thought the money pressure might make him more willing to negotiate a return. A congressional staffer called asking if I'd testify at a hearing about international child abduction. I flew to Washington and sat at a long table with 12 other parents telling our stories. The representatives nodded and took notes, but nothing changed right away. They promised to look look at stronger laws, but I'd heard that before from politicians. The Thai court hearing finally happened over video link 9 months after my son disappeared. Riker looked skinny on the screen and kept rubbing his eyes like he hadn't slept. The judge ordered mediation first, which meant more delays, but at least someone was finally listening. My lawyer explained this was actually progress since Thai courts usually ignored these cases completely. The mediation sessions dragged on for weeks with Riker's lawyer making demands and us countering with evidence. Finally, he agreed to supervised video calls, which wasn't much, but it was something. The first call was set up through the embassy with a Thai social worker watching. My son looked confused when he saw me on the screen and kept glancing at his father before answering my questions. Why is Riker suddenly looking skinny and tired when he's the one who chose this mess? The timing of him agreeing to video calls right when his money runs low makes me wonder if this is about cash more than caring about their son. I asked about school and he said it was okay, but his eyes looked sad. When I told him I loved him, he started to say something, then stopped and looked at Riker again. After 14 months of silence, just hearing his voice made me sob for an hour after the call ended. The social worker said he seemed coached, which would help our case. She'd seen it before with parental abduction cases where kids got trained on what to say. My lawyer filed her observations with the court as more evidence of interference. The second call went better because Riker had to wait in another room. My son relaxed a little and told me about the beach near their apartment and how he missed his friends. He asked when he could come home, and I had to lie and say soon. The truth was, the Thai courts moved so slow it could be another year of hearings and appeals. Each call cost $500 in fees between the embassy and social workers and translators. I picked up extra data entry projects to cover it because hearing his voice was worth eating rice and beans for dinner every night. The investigator sent photos showing Riker at local bars, which violated the conditions he'd agreed to in mediation about maintaining a stable environment. The mediator called 3 weeks later with what she thought was a breakthrough plan, where Riker would bring our son back for a 2-week visit that would quietly become permanent once they landed. She'd worked it all out with both legal teams, and the Thai authorities would look the other way about the custody order if Riker voluntarily returned. I held my breath while she explained how this could work, but Riker shot it down immediately, saying I'd have him arrested the second his plane touched down. He wasn't wrong because I'd already talked to the FBI about exactly that. My lawyer tried to convince him there'd be no charges if he cooperated, but Riker knew better and hung up on the call. 2 days later, I sat in my boss's office staring at my performance review that listed 17 missed days and countless incomplete projects. She slid the paper across her desk and told me she had to give me an official warning, but then closed the door and said she understood what I was going through. I promised to do better while we both knew I couldn't, because every spare second went to phone calls with lawyers and embassy workers and private investigators. The nonprofit I'd been working with called that afternoon to connect me with a woman whose ex took their twins to Thailand 4 years ago. She got them back last year when her ex finally ran out of money and called her begging for help to come home. She told me to be patient because these guys always burn through their savings faster than they think, and eventually they get desperate enough to negotiate. Her ex lasted 3 years living off credit cards and selling everything he owned before he cracked. I wrote down everything she said about hiring local lawyers and working with the embassy, and which judges were sympathetic to mothers. My phone rang at 2 in the morning with the investigator's number, and I answered before the second ring. Riker had been arrested in Phuket for working at a dive shop without a proper visa after someone reported him to immigration. They released him after 6 hours, but now Thai authorities were watching him more closely, and he couldn't work legally anymore. The investigator sent me photos of him being led out of the police station looking angry and disheveled. During our next video call, my son mentioned he missed our dog, and it was the first time he'd said he wanted anything from home. I grabbed my phone and recorded the dog barking and wagging his tail and played it during our next call, which made him smile for the first time in months. He asked if the dog still slept on his bed, and I showed him his room exactly how he'd left it with his soccer trophies and Pokemon cards still on the shelf. After the call, I sat on his bed and cried into his pillow that still smelled faintly like his shampoo. 3 weeks later, the Thai judge finally ruled that my son should be returned to the United States immediately, but gave Riker 30 days to appeal the decision. My lawyer warned me he'd definitely appeal, and this could drag on another year through the Thai appellate courts, but at least we'd won the first round. Riker filed his appeal the next day, claiming I'd bribed officials and fabricated evidence. That night, Riker's mother showed up at my door with an envelope containing $10,000 in cash. She said it was Michaela's college fund she'd been saving since our daughter was born and wanted me to use it to bring my grandson home. I tried to refuse, but she pushed it into my hands and said Michaela would want her brother safe. I used every penny to hire the best Thai legal team my lawyer could recommend. The day that should have been my son's 5th grade graduation, I sat in my car outside his school watching his classmates walk across the stage in their little caps and gowns. His best friend's mom saw me and knocked on my window to give me a hug while I sobbed about how he should be up there with them getting his certificate and taking pictures. She stayed with me until the ceremony ended and all the normal families drove away to their normal celebrations. The investigator called the next week to report that Riker's girlfriend had packed up and returned to Australia after a huge fight where neighbors heard screaming and things breaking. He was drinking more at the local bars, and several people said he seemed unstable and paranoid. The investigator had photos of him stumbling out of bars at 3 in the morning and getting into arguments with tourists. I worried constantly about my son's safety with Riker falling apart, but my lawyer said it might actually help our case if the Thai authorities saw him as a problem. 2 months later, Riker's appeal was rejected much faster than expected when the judge found no merit to any of his claims about bribery or false evidence. The ruling came down on a Tuesday afternoon, and my lawyer called me immediately saying Riker had one final appeal to the Thai Supreme Court, but she doubted they'd even hear it. She said he was running out of money based on the court filing fees he'd been late paying, and his lawyer had requested payment up front for any further work. The investigator confirmed Riker had been trying to sell his motorcycle and was 3 months behind on rent for their apartment. 2 months went by by without any word, and then my phone rang at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. It was Riker calling from Thailand, and his voice sounded different, tired and broken. He said he'd bring our son back if I dropped everything about Michaela and paid for their flights home. My hands shook as I held the phone because this meant letting my daughter's killer walk free, but I said yes immediately. I wired the money that morning and spent the next 3 weeks barely sleeping, checking flight trackers constantly. The day finally came, and I stood at the international arrivals gate watching people stream through customs. Then I saw them, and my son broke away from Riker and ran straight into my arms, screaming, "Mommy!" I held him so tight while uniformed officers moved in and handcuffed Riker right there in the terminal. He didn't fight or say anything, just looked at me with this empty expression as they led him away. The prosecutor's office called me 2 days later and said they wouldn't be charging Riker for Michaela's death because too much time had passed and there wasn't enough evidence. They said he'd get 18 months for custodial interference but would probably only serve 6 with good behavior. I threw my phone against the wall and screamed until my throat hurt because 6 months felt like nothing for everything he'd done. My son started having nightmares almost immediately, waking up crying and calling for his sister. He couldn't focus at the school, and sometimes he'd call me by his teacher's name or forget where he was. The therapist said it would take time, and we went twice a week to a small office with toys and books. One day he asked me why Daddy couldn't live with us anymore, and I told him Daddy had made some bad choices and needed time to think about them. He nodded like he understood, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. The months turned into years, and slowly things got better. He started making friends again and joined the soccer team at the school. He still had bad days where he'd cry for no reason or get angry and throw things, but those days got fewer and farther between. 3 years have passed now since that day at Michaela's grave when I got served papers. My son is doing better in the school and laughs more than he cries. Riker gets supervised visits every other Saturday at a community center downtown, and my son comes back quiet but not upset. Some mornings I wake up and can't believe this is my life, raising my son alone with Michaela gone and her killer walking around free. But we get up every day and make breakfast and do homework and go to soccer practice. We're surviving one day at a time, and maybe that's all we can do right now. Thanks for hanging out and wondering through all this with me. Hopefully my questions kept things interesting. Until next time, friends, like the video. It helps more than you think.